The video comes from Deano Outdoors is the name of the YouTube channel. The title of the article, or the title of the video, is Flagship Fertilizer with 3% Iron, Must See Results. It's very short. I'm only going to show, it's 3 minutes, 4 minute video. I'm not even going to show the whole thing. I'm going to show only portions of it because he just shows himself mowing his lawn. For those people who are listening, it looks like he's out in the country somewhere, maybe in Iowa somewhere, or maybe even Kentucky. He's got a silo in the background, beautiful front yard, maybe an acre, half an acre, something like that. It's pretty nice little yard. Looks like it's tall fescue, striped up, pretty decent. And he's going to be talking about his fertilizer. And this is an example. What I wanted to explain again, what I did maybe the last episode, is what's referred to as the composition division flaw in reasoning. And what happens is because, and it happens quite a bit with fertilizers, where you'll see a tag and you'll see it say 3% iron or 6% iron or whatever the case is. And you'll put it out and you'll see a response. And no one's really going to question that per se if the fertilizer has nitrogen in it. But because the fertilizer also had something else in it, we can't say for sure that the response was due to one thing. And so the composition division fallacy is because you saw a response to the entire fertilizer and then you claim that it came from just iron. That's a flaw in reasoning. It's a fallacy because we don't know what else in there could have caused it. So just because the fertilizer caused the response doesn't mean every component of the fertilizer contributed to that response. And the YouTube fertilizer garbage that's out there, they take advantage of this. Oftentimes I think they're just ignorant as well, but sometimes I think I'm convinced that they're not ignorant. They know exactly that iron's not going to do anything. So that's the reason they put in nitrogen. So they know the nitrogen is probably going to give a response. They know that the iron's not going to give a response, but they also are convinced that the iron's going to sell product. So they put it in there, they put it on the label, and they sell. So that's the composition division fallacy. And I want people to be aware of this gentleman. I don't know this gentleman's name, but he's a victim of it. Okay. He's not, I've watched this video once or twice, and I don't think that he's contributing to this problem per se. He is by putting a video on YouTube. But I think he's a victim. I see him as a victim of YouTube charlatans, basically, and grifters taking advantage of people who don't quite understand how the fertilizers work and how to identify a certain response from a certain element. Well, let's watch this and see what he has to say, and I'll kind of walk through it as we go.
Hello, everyone. Today I'm out on my newly renovated perennial ryegrass lawn, and it's looking a little weak, a little yellow. I've got a little bit of rust spot in some areas throughout the lawn. And it's just not the deep green that it should be. So today I'm going to apply this Yardmaster Flagship fertilizer. It's a 2406 and it contains 3% iron.
Okay, so Yardmaster 2406 fertilizer. For those listening, he's showing the bag. He's showing the label. Well, showing the label. You can't quite read it. I'm going to bring up the label here in a minute. But he's showing it, and then for the next minute or two, all he does is go out and he spreads it. I'm going to skip ahead to 2 minutes. I'm not skipping anything necessarily important to the topic. He just puts the fertilizer on the lawn, and he comes back 3 weeks later.
3 weeks ago, I applied the Yardmaster's Flagship fertilizer to my lawn. It has a 3% iron in it, which is supposed to help darken it up. Let's take a look at the results.
So for those of you listening, he's showing the results of his lawn, and his lawn looks good. I mean, I wish my lawn looked that good. It looks really good. Nice and green. He's clearly got I don't know, probably a 3-foot deck, or at least a 2-foot deck on his mower. I mean, he's got probably a pretty good sized mower for that lawn, and it looks really good. Looks good.
It's hard to believe that just a little over 2 months ago, this lawn was completely brown as I started my renovation project.
So he just skipped through there. I don't know what he was showing his lawn there with brown. I don't know if he sprayed it out with non-selective or what he did here, but it was brown. I guess he killed it out and reseeded it or something. I don't know what he did, but it's very, very common to see a nice, strong response during the first month or two after seeding. And he put out some fertilizer. I'm assuming he seeded it. I mean, clearly it's either, I don't think it's dormant. The crops behind this road here are very green, so I don't think it's just dormant. He probably killed it out and reseeded it, and he fertilized it, and it looks good.
If you guys want to see more of that and how I renovated this lawn, I'll leave a link in the description. Please check it out. As you can see, it looks like it has darkened it up quite a bit. It also made it nice and full.
And I agree. It looks good, I admit. I mean, there's no question, and I would have no worries or concerns about recommending a fertilizer that contained those nitrogen sources. We're going to look at it in a second. The fertilizer was a 2406. I can't remember the ratio there, but 2406, a lot of nitrogen. You're going to see this response. The problem I have is what he says here in just a second or two.
Getting pretty thick. And I did water it in. I applied 1 inch of water from my irrigation system once per week. This is the flagship by Yard Mastery with the 3% iron.
And see, that's what it is. And see, that's what gets people. It's this 3% iron, 2% iron, 6% iron, whatever it is, 20% iron, these really high iron content fertilizers that convince people to put it out. And when they do, they see a response, which reconfirms their initial belief that this will do what it says it will do. It will turn it green because it has the iron. So let's take a look at the label and see what's actually in this fertilizer that could cause or result in a green. So here's the flagship fertilizer label. It's a 2406. It took me a little while to find this. It's a weird looking PDF for a label, but it's 2406. Here's the 3% iron, just like he said. We go down here, we'll see the analysis, the guaranteed analysis, and it's 24% nitrogen, 21.5% urea. And what we want to look at here is over here in the derived from component, the area. We have polymer coated urea and we have urea. And those are the two urea sources. We have 2% ammoniacal nitrogen that comes from ammonium sulfate. So we have urea, we have polymer coated urea, and we have ammonium sulfate, and we have some biosolids in there as well that will have some nitrogen in it. But you can see the majority is from urea and from polymer coated urea. Okay, so it doesn't have much, it doesn't seem like anyway, it has much polymer coated urea in it, or slow, because it says water insoluble nitrogen. That can both come from the biosolid and from the polymer coated urea. So it's hard for me to tell from this bag, from this label, exactly how much is urea versus polymer coated urea. I don't know. But in any case, the majority is from urea. When we get down to the iron, we're going to be seeing three sources. We have iron sulfate, we have iron sucrate, and we have iron EDTA. Now, of those three sources, we know, or we're convinced, hopefully we'll be convinced if you've seen any of the previous videos I've gone over, we've seen numerous papers that have used iron sucrate and iron sulfate. And I think there was only one that showed a response from iron sulfate, and that was in the case where the iron was so deficient that it wasn't even responding to nitrogen. It was that case where iron was the limiting nutrient, and they did show a response to that application. But in every other case we've shown, there has never been a response to the iron sulfate product as a granule. There's only been responses to iron sulfate applied as a liquid to the leaves, as well as iron sucrate. There has not been a response from iron sucrate. We've shown the solubility of both iron sulfate and iron sucrate in those soils, the solubility of iron in soils paper that I went over. And we also, was that it? Yeah, we also did an extraction with iron sucrate and iron sulfate. 100% was soluble from iron sulfate and acid, and only, iron sucrate? It was 2 or 3% of the iron was soluble in iron sucrate, something like that. In other words, iron sucrate comes from iron oxide. And because it comes from iron oxide, it's insoluble from the beginning, essentially. Okay, there's nothing in iron sucrate that's going to become soluble anytime soon. There's very little that's soluble. In the case of iron sulfate, 100% is already soluble, and even that source becomes insoluble within about an hour after hitting the soil in a moist soil, because it oxidizes extremely fast. Okay, so neither one of those sources, here it is, iron sulfate or iron sucrate, neither one of these sources would ever be expected to really, well, with very rare exceptions of iron sulfate, we're not going to expect to see a response from granular applied iron sulfate or iron sucrate. Just forget about it. You might as well just go buy a lottery ticket. You have a better chance of winning the lottery than you would seeing a response from granular applied iron sulfate or iron sucrate. But there is iron EDTA in here. Okay, granular iron EDTA. And if we look down here, we see 0.45% chelated iron. So the total is 3% iron, and of this 3%, so it'd be a sixth, I guess around a sixth of this is chelated iron, EDTA. So one can easily be convinced that, well, it has EDTA. And Travis, you've shown where EDTA does remain soluble for some time after application in some soils. And that is true. We showed that the paper that I did actually, where we looked at all these different soils, and the EDTA can remain soluble in the soil for a week or two or more, but it's all dependent upon the soil pH. Okay. If the soil pH is greater than 7, which is generally when people consider using an iron chelate, EDTA is not going to be a chelate that's going to sustain solubility of that iron at that high pH. It's only going to sustain solubility at pHs lower than 7, say, 6 or 7 or below. Okay. So just because there's EDTA in here doesn't mean that that source is going to result in a turfgrass greening in your case. You have to know what your soil pH is, or be aware of the soil pH. And if it's 6, then you may have a very, very small chance, because you still have to hit the dosage. In other words, the rate of iron has to be high enough to elicit a response. I've used this analogy before. It's the exact same thing as taking pharmaceuticals. Take a Tylenol. 2 Tylenol will more than likely reduce your headache. But if you take just one little fraction of one little granule and put it in your mouth from Tylenol, it's not going to do anything probably for your headache, because you didn't take the right dosage. And in the case of iron and EDTA, there's a chance on lower pH soils that it can actually result in a turfgrass greening, but you have to get the dosage high enough. And in this case, if you're applying this product at 1 pound of nitrogen, well, let's just do the math. If you're applying this product at 1 pound of nitrogen, you're going to be applying 4.16 pounds per 1,000 square feet. And you probably need, with foliar iron, you probably need between 1 and 5 pounds of iron per acre, something like that. With granular iron, it varies greatly, but oftentimes it's 20 to 80 pounds per acre. That's very, very high granular rates to get a response from granular applied iron. You'll see that in the literature all over the place, where the rate of the application of liquid iron is 1 to 5 pounds per acre, and of granular iron, it's 20 or greater just to get a response from it. So in this case, you're applying 4.16 pounds per 1,000 square feet times 43 gives you 179. Hang on, I got a dot here. 180 pounds per acre times 0.45. Whoops, hang on. 180 times 0.45%, so 0.005 is around let's just say 1 pound. So you're applying around 1 pound. If my math's right, someone can check my math and correct me if I'm wrong here. But if my math's right, you're applying about 1 pound per acre of granular iron from EDTA. So in this case, you have a chelate that's not really useful above pH 7, and you have an application rate that is almost certainly never going to result in a turfgrass greening. And you have the 2 other iron sources, iron sucrate and iron sulfate. We're convinced that those, or hopefully you're convinced, I'm convinced that they'll never result in a turfgrass greening under almost any condition. I mean, very, 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 very rare conditions where iron sulfate granular would result in a response. So this is a case where this particular, I'll call him a victim. I mean, this particular victim he's been victimized by the iron misinformation machine. It's the Turfgrass industry iron misinformation machine that's been generating and cranking out misinformation for decades. And he happened to get caught up in it and became misinformed and bought the product, put it out, saw a response to it, and was convinced it was from the iron. When you're putting out that much nitrogen, the chances are pretty good you're going to see a response, but it's from the nitrogen, not the iron, okay? So I'm sorry if that gentleman got probably taken advantage of, but he did see a response. It's from the nitrogen. So that begs the question, couldn't you just put out the product and see a response without paying for the iron? That's what I'm trying to get people to grasp, is that the answer is probably yes. You can probably put out, say, whatever I don't know what the analysis would eventually be, 3006 or 3506 or whatever the analysis would be from formulation, where you take out the zinc and the iron and all this other stuff that's in it that you don't need. Apply just the nitrogen, maybe a little bit of phosphorus, a little bit of potassium if you see some deficiency in the turf. And you're going to see probably the same response and do it for less money.